Hey everyone, my name is Bill, and this is my portion of our presentation. I'm doing the section on technological literacy. And just to get us kind of started with technological literacy, I'm actually using an example of technology right now. A little plug here for something called Screencast-O-Matic. You can see their URL down there at the bottom of the screen. It's this software combined with a microphone on a headset and PowerPoint that's allowing me to make this presentation right now, and known as a screencast. So for those of you who haven't had a chance to use something like this before, it's a great technology. It's very easy to use, and really a great aid to doing something where a PowerPoint all by itself isn't sufficient and it needs a little bit of explanation. You'll also notice that as I move my cursor around the screen, it records it. And This way you can point to things and show things, and if you have a little more sophisticated version, you can draw on it and record and do whatever you'd like. So it's a cool technology to start with. Okay, technological literacy. We should start off by talking about first exactly what technological literacy is, and who better to define that for us than the U.S. Department of Education. They say that it is essentially the ability to use computers and other technologies to improve learning, productivity, and performance. And we should point out the date is 1997, and I think if we were to look up the same definition from the Department of Ed today, it might de-emphasize the role of computers a little bit and emphasize more that word other. Technological literacy, though certainly still centered around the computer, focuses on an awful lot of different technologies besides just the traditional personal computer that you'll find in the classroom. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Um, what's really key to understand about technological literacy is the way that its view and its position within the curriculum has really changed. If you take a look at the old way of thinking about technological literacy, you'll see as you look here that you had your standard curriculum, and as a part of that curriculum, one thing was technology skills. It was considered sort of just a separate content area like foreign language or language arts or social studies or math or any of the other subject areas. And like we too often do in a lot of subjects in school, it was kept in its isolated little box. There wasn't a tremendous amount of interdisciplinary connection. And most of the subjects used technology sort of as a novelty, not really as an integral part of teaching their curriculum. What we want to emphasize with technological literacy in what I'll call the new view of technological literacy is that technology really has to be, given that we are in the 21st century, central to all of the curricular subjects that we teach in our schools. Technology needs to be a huge part of it, and it needs to not only does it need to be integrated into all of the subjects and not a standalone subject by itself, but it needs to be used to really truly become a seamless part of teaching. And again, to stress the idea that it's not just a novelty or not just a fun way of doing something different, but that we recognize that technology is central and that there are things that we can do with technology that we really can't do any other way. And that's hugely important. It's a very different way of looking at the role technology plays today. So why is technological literacy important? Well, there's a few reasons. I like to point out that technology is helping students to learn to communicate and express ideas in very new ways, whether that be things like Twitter and Facebook, whether that be obviously things like blogs and wikis and emails, or whether it's things like using Weebly to create a web page, or using even something simple like Microsoft Paint to create graphic arts. These are all ways that really quite honestly would have I'll say all skills that students are beginning to learn using technology that would have been, if not impossible, very difficult to learn any other way prior to the introduction of technology into our schools. Um, One of the other great things is technology is helping students to learn to think differently. Um, because of the ability of technology to instantly access different pieces of information at a whim, at a moment's notice, students are beginning to develop much stronger nonlinear reading and thinking skills than previous generations. And traditionally, if you were to read a book, for example, you would read from the front of the page to the back of the page and then move on to the next page, and it was one continuous flow of information. You didn't have the option to jump around a lot. Today, if somebody had an iPad, um, in their hand, and they were reading that exact same book, but within that iPad page there was a hyperlink on one of the words that a student may not, for example, have known the definition of, or if there was a character, a historical character in the book that the student might want to learn more about, they would simply click on that information and move to that person. That's a very different skill than just simply reading linearly across a page, and it's one that technology is beginning to promote. Um, that obviously has advantages and disadvantages, especially for students who have trouble being organized and who have trouble simplifying information and sorting information. But it obviously also has its advantages, and it's important to understand that whether we think it's good or bad, it isn't going away, and we need to understand and use it in the most productive manner possible. Um, and as I mentioned a minute ago, of course, we know that technology allows for creativity and an access to information that would be virtually impossible, virtually inconceivable without technology. After all, this is called the information age thanks to technology. And here's sort of a graphic representation of what role technology is now playing. You can see that um, from each box, not only obviously it's a central theme, but now it's helping us to do things that were done not as well before. We see it helps to construct new knowledge. We see that helps us to explore knowledge, to support learning by constructing knowledge, to create our own knowledge as opposed to just following things that others have presented to us. It allows us to reflect, and perhaps most importantly, it's allowed learning to be a much more social process by allowing us to communicate more smoothly and seamlessly. And as research continues to indicate that learning in social settings and constructing our own knowledge is a far more effective way of creating true lasting understanding. And technology plays a huge role in that. It's also important to note that technology, as I mentioned in the beginning, is not just about PC computers anymore. Some people probably still tend to think of it that way, and though the PC still plays an important role, and by the way, that's just a picture of one of my original computers. Not actually my computer, but I had that computer at one point when I was in elementary school, I think. Um, but there's so many other technologies that we use today now, and it's important to be aware of them. We obviously use things like smartboards. We use, possibly in some schools, we use things like iPads, and even if they're not used in the school, there's a very good chance that students are using them outside of school. Um, Software packages that are available online, like Moodle, which happens to be a class management software program. Wikis, what is a wiki and how can it be used within your classroom? And even graphic arts. These are all examples of things that now we are integrating not only in graphic art classes or computer class, but we're integrating them into virtually every subject into the school. And if we're not, the odds are that we probably should be. Um, the other thing that technological literacy requires is technology, what I'll call technology skills. Not just knowing how to actually physically use the technology, but also knowing some of the ancillary skills that go with it. For example, netiquette. Netiquette refers to proper online behavior, just the way that you present yourself, that you speak, that you treat others. There's a sort of etiquette, if you will, or netiquette, to how that's done. And that's a skill that many students, many adults also, but many students need to learn in the 21st century. It becomes critically important that students are able to sort and assess information. So much information can be gleaned through using technology that it is more and more and more important that students be able to decipher between quote good and bad sources of information, or and be able to delineate information and be able to sort through it to find what they really truly need. Those are skills that are all the more important today. Um, Being able to choose the proper medium. What form of technology would a student use to be able to problem solve a certain situation or to present a presentation like this one, perhaps? Which ones would work the best? Many times they overlap and have different purposes. And when, frankly, is technology not appropriate to be used? When is good old-fashioned pen and paper a worthwhile thing to do? Those are all questions that a person who is technologically literate can answer. Um, Internet safety and security comes along with technological literacy. It's a whole new realm of people, of course, who would like to do harm to our students, and or frankly, who are situations where students put themselves out there in ways that are not appropriate. I experienced that for my first time recently with my economics class. I'm actually teaching a portion of the class online, and there's a messaging feature. Um, and I evidently did not make it clear enough to my students this past week that messaging in truly personal information or messaging certainly with inappropriate language, especially in a classroom management program software package, is inappropriate. And I actually got a note from the system administrator saying that he was deactivating some of my students' accounts because of that. Students need to understand things like the permanence of what they put on the internet, and the fact that so many other people are able to see what it is that they're putting, um, and that can have real long-term ramifications. Um, and then, as my wife, the librarian, would also point out, there's also very different ideas about copyright and privacy. Um, Copying has always been a challenge in schools and in academia, but now that with the click and paste feature, frankly, of so many of our web browsers and software packages, that word processing softwares, it becomes more of an issue. And privacy. What should you put out there and what shouldn't you put out there, and what do you have the right to see and what do you have the right to keep others from seeing about you? Those are all questions that students need to learn and understand. And as that little cartoon kind of reminds us to wrap this up, our students and our kids see technology and are experiencing technology very differently than we did. And it's important that we keep that in mind and recognize that, unlike perhaps how we might have been taught technology, um, it is meant to enhance the entire curriculum and be used in context with it, not as a standalone feature. And if you can do that, if you can use technology to truly enhance the curriculum, then you are what we call technologically literate. Thanks so much for listening, and if you have any questions about how this presentation was created, please let me know.